Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and we are back for more news and politics of the day. This is for November the 2nd, Saturday, November the 2nd, 2023. Okay, now, first thing I have pulled up here is from Ask Historians. They've got a question. Is there any actually is there actually any evidence that the Civil War wasn't fought over slavery? Hello, everyone. I'm taking U.S. history and we're covering the Civil War. Our teacher is teaching us that the Civil War was caused because of the Union's refusal to acknowledge the rights of states, deal with border security issues, address Indian encroachment on southern states, unfair taxation, and the Union's refusal to give up Fort Sumter. Is there any merit to these arguments? We've just started this unit, so if there is any other common arguments used to defend the Confederate States that are incorrect, I'd really appreciate hearing about them. We know it was about slavery. If you go read each state's reasons for secession, each one of those states that seceded mentions in some form or another the importance of slavery, of being able to own slaves. We know that it was perhaps the largest part of the rebellion. Yeah, it's complete bullshit. It's been covered here many times. Just go here and type in Civil War and you'll find more than you ever wanted to know. The most relevant comment is now from a deleted user here. They put the link. Basically, slavery was the root of all the entire war. Sure, there are other issues seemingly not related to slavery, but when you dig at it, you find slavery, states' rights, were only a means used to justify secession. States' rights by themselves is not a tool, not really a reason in it of itself, as states' rights could be used for both pro and anti-slavery reasons. An example of the anti-slavery was personal liberty laws passed in many northern states that basically said citizens did not have to comply with the new Fugitive Slave Act from the Compromise of 1850, and this ultimately was an issue in Prigg v. Pennsylvania. You might find this video series, Checkmate Lincolnites, very helpful. They are well sourced and he uses literal quotes in his comment section to show how he's not straw manning. I will get on my soapbox to explain something. Historically, Southerners were able to control all three branches of government enough to prevent any federal anti-slavery action from happening. In terms of the presidency, they either had a Southerner or a Southern sympathizer unwilling to rock the boat and willing to protect slavery as a property right under the Constitution. Examples include James Polk or James Buchanan. Also included President John Quincy Adams. That being said, after the presidency, he came back to the House and was the hellhound of abolition and Old Man Eloquent for his abolitionist positions. In terms of the Supreme Court, the court was generally dominated by either Southern slave owners or again people sympathetic, unwilling to rock the boat and willing to protect slavery as a property right. who was that Chief Justice? Guy's from Maryland. He was Chief Justice for over 20 years. But he was very much pro slavery. He said, no, South has the right to own slaves. Now, as to Congress, there are two chambers, but both needed to agree to pass a law. The House was based on population, and the Senate, 2 per state. House was based. There had to be a balancing act in the Senate between slave and free states, and this balance prevented any anti-slavery legislation from being passed because the 50-50 balance meant no majority. In the House, it was based on population, so the northern free states on paper would be able to outvote the southern slave states. However, that didn't always happen because the northerners were often divided over slavery in terms of what to do about it and couldn't always agree on a policy, in part because racism. And secondly, the Three-Fifths Compromise gave southern states additional representation. Remember, Three-Fifths Compromise is essentially saying slaves as themselves do not count as a human being, but because there was so much more population in the north, the southern states eventually convinced the northern states to represent slaves as 3/5 of a person. So they're still not full people, but they help us with our population. Yeah. So this should have protected slavery as an institution, which it did, but that wasn't enough. Northern states continued the trend of outlawing slavery. Southern states continued the trend of enforcing slavery, even making it harder to voluntarily manumit slaves. Southern society was ran by a Southern Democratic white aristocratic planter class, cosplaying both the novels of a certain Sir Walter Scott obsessed with honor. Yeah. But because poor whites could vote too, so they needed to do something to get their votes. And I've made this point before. There's a video I made on slavery in Appalachia, southern Appalachia. While slaves still existed there, they were in far shorter amounts. Most people in the Appalachian South were trying to just survive. And so when you have people wealthy enough to own a handful of slaves and didn't have to pay your normal person to do chores to help earn money so they could have money, they detested the fact that slaves were used, because honestly it was a hard scrabble life. And I'm sure a lot of it was like that throughout the South. Not all people owned slaves in the South. It was mostly the very, very rich white plantation owners. Throughout, there were some people who were decent enough off, they might own a few slaves. And then, of course, there's also enough poor whites. They own no slaves, and they're just trying to survive. And so they um, the South knew they had to do things to keep the Southern whites on the same, the poor whites on the same side. So yeah. So they employed the racism flavored carrot and stick. On the stick end, they used rhetoric of a servile insurrection or a race war. Sounds familiar, don't it? The idea being if we free the slaves, they'll rise up and declare war on us because they are savages, unshackled from slavery, and also we mistreat them, so they'll want revenge. But they almost had the self awareness. Almost. So poor white people, go be racist and vote for us too, because this racial societal order has you not on the bottom, and you don't want to be on the bottom, do you? Because without slavery, that would happen. They use slave rebellions, such as in Haiti, but also slave rebellion like John Brown's raid on Harper's Ferry, Denmark Vesey, making a realistic fear. Yeah. The raid on Harper's Ferry is what is in now present day West Virginia. At the time of the Civil War, or when the actual event happened, it was still part of Virginia. So yeah, it is during the Civil War when West Virginia is like, we do not wish to be part of the southern states, part of the rebellion. So they seceded from the state of Virginia itself and became West Virginia under the United States. But here was the carrot. Hey, poor white person, wouldn't you want to be a large slaveholder like me? With lots of land and lots of slaves, you won't have to work a day in your life. You just yell at your overseers to drive the slaves. And that hypothetical future was dangled in front of them. Also, something that tends to be used. You're not poor. You're just a temporarily disadvantaged millionaire. Yeah. If they wanted that, all they had to do was fall in line and vote for the Southern Democratic planter white aristocracy. They complied, seeking that future which required one, for slavery to continue to exist, and two, for new land for those plantations. So what did that mean? New slave states. That was one of the factors behind Western expansion. So, in order to keep the racial order together, they had to secede. Why? Similarly, that's why the poorest white people, those who couldn't afford slaves, fought the hardest. Because they were always promised, you have a better life if you fight for us. And just like Fox News does now to a lot of Americans, it brainwashes them into believing, see, this is what the other side holds in store for you. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, they talk quite a bit throughout here. I'm going to stop at this point. But yeah, slavery was the key issue, yes. There are other issues that were around it, but slavery was the key issue. There's no doubt in that. Now, we have and ask historians when people would send their children to relatives via the United States Postal Service, was the mail handler responsible for feeding and changing the baby? I'm kind of curious on this myself because I'm aware that in the early 1900s and in the 1800s, often children would be sent by mail to visit relatives that are like across the country and stuff. Or was there someone whose job it was to take care of the baby and babies on their journey? Also, I hate that my mind jumps to this, but I have this feeling that there were some instances where the child may have been harmed. Giving your baby to a stranger on such a long journey is crazy to me. Let's see. Post. We removed your post. Okay, so they don't really have anything in depth. Looks like someone had posted something, but it was removed by a moderator. But yeah, I'm kind of curious on that myself. Because, yeah, it was something that did happen. Babies being sent in the postal service. It's not just babies, it's young children. Sometimes they were like 5, 6, and it's like, we're going to send you to your grandparents, but your grandparents live all the way over there. So they would be sent via mail because it was cheaper. Yeah. It's interesting. Anyway, here we have a picture. Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, and Eric Idle goofing around in 1979 while filming The Empire Strikes Back. Carrie Fisher, who took this picture, rented Idle's house while he was away filming The Life of Brian. The Rolling Stones were recording 2 blocks away. So yeah. Mark Hamill, who plays Luke Skywalker, Harrison Ford, Han Solo, Eric Idle of Monty Python, who owned the house. Yeah. So it's a nice picture of cultural history. Alright, let's get into some solid news here. From NBC News, abandoned babies found decomposing in Gaza hospital weeks after it was evacuated. No child should have to die alone, a charity said in response to a widely shared TV report that sent shockwaves on social media. Yeah, ceasefire's over, but not before it offered a glimpse of the war's horrors to Palestinians in Gaza and people around the world. As residents used the fragile truce to find aid, search for loved ones under the rubble, and head home to survey the destruction, a particularly disturbing scene emerged. Seen in the video that moves through the abandoned and disarrayed hallways of the pediatric care unit at Al Nasser Children's Hospital in northern Gaza were several babies whose unattended bodies lay on separate hospital beds. A blurred vision of the video has shared widely on social media this week, and a grim and graphic contrast to other scenes of families reunited as hostages and prisoners were freed. There is no winning in this conflict. It's just killing to kill. Period. From ABC News. 1 dead, 4 injured in Las Vegas shooting of homeless, according to the police. The shooting occurred at a homeless encampment police said. At least one person was killed and four others wounded in a shooting at a homeless encampment in Las Vegas on Friday. The incident occurred in the area of Charleston Boulevard and US 95 around 5:30 p.m. local time. Officers responded to a homeless encampment where witnesses directed them to multiple victims. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department said the victims, all of whom were unhoused, were transported to University Medical Center. One victim, a male in his 50s, was pronounced dead at the hospital due to his injuries. Police said one man in his 30s was in critical condition. Two others in their 30s and a victim in his late teens were in stable condition. Let's see. Police believe the victims were shot by one suspect who remains at large. Okay, so yeah. It's ridiculous. This is from The Guardian. Suspect arrested in fatal shootings of 3 unhoused men in LA, police say. So we've got shootings in Las Vegas of homeless, shootings in Los Angeles of homeless. Los Angeles man who has already been arrested in another shooting investigation has been identified as the suspect in 3 recent killings of unhoused men. A Los Angeles police chief, Michael Moore, said 33-year-old Jared Joseph Powell was arrested as the suspect in the 3 killings, after authorities determined that a firearm found in the vehicle he had been driving when he was arrested earlier was linked to the shootings. So, this is ridiculous. Why? What does that get you? Shooting homeless. Also from The Guardian, Israeli grid maps make life in Gaza a macabre game of battleships, say aid workers. Online system designed to order precise evacuations inaccessible to those without power or network access. Israel's new grid system for targeted evacuation warnings in southern Gaza risks turning life in the territory into a macabre game of battleships. When Israel resumed its offensive in Gaza after a week-long ceasefire deal collapsed, it immediately signaled plans to intensify attacks on the south of the territory in areas where Palestinian civilians had previously been urged to take shelter. Bombing began within seconds of the truce ending early on Friday morning, and at least 200 people had been killed by Saturday, Gaza's health authorities say. Residents who had been squeezed into a shrinking corner of Gaza, most of them already internal refugees displaced and struggling to find enough to eat, described desperation and despair as they weighed up what to do as the fighting drew closer. They were hemmed in by the sea on one side, the closely guarded Israeli border on the other, and at their backs was the border with Egypt. Yeah. There is no conflict that one can win. This is just a massacre, a genocide. Period. Period. From AP News. Protester critically injured after setting self on fire outside Israeli consulate in Atlanta. Yeah. the idea of self-immolation, well, just immolation, self-immolation, setting oneself on fire as a protest is not unique. It's rare, but it's not unique. It has been done before. I know some monks have committed the act in protest. But yeah. That's ridiculous that it's come to this. All right. I don't want. Well, what I was going to show from this, which is supposed to be New York Daily News, George Santos's constituents, the people in his district, cheer his expulsion. This creep is no longer our representative. So, yeah. From truthout.org, the Supreme Court may be poised to kill the Voting Rights Act once and for all. A federal court said only the government, not civil rights groups or individuals, can enforce the Voting Rights Act. Yeah, but unfortunately, there's too many members of the court and Congress that are bought fucking off. People march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge with placards bearing the image of late U.S. Representative John Lewis, for whom the most recent Voting Rights Act is named, during commemorations of the 57th anniversary of Bloody Sunday on March the 6th, 2022 in Selma, Alabama. The Voting Rights Act, which Congress passed to enforce the 15th Amendment, has been targeted by the right wing since it was enacted in 1965. In the last few years, the Supreme Court has weakened the Voting Rights Act, but it has never ruled that civil rights organizations or aggrieved individuals could not sue to enforce its provisions. On November the 20th, 2023, a panel of 8th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled 2-1 in a racial gerrymandering case that only the Department of Justice can file lawsuits to vindicate voting rights under Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. In Arkansas NAACP versus Arkansas Board of Apportionment, the appellate panel dismissed the lawsuit filed by black Arkansas voters who claimed the state's congressional map would illegally undermine the voting strength of black Arkansans. The case is likely headed to the Supreme Court, although the Eighth Circuit's ruling flies in face of the prior case law. The High Court may use it as an opportunity to gut the Voting Rights Act once and for all, and I have no fucking doubt that they very well may do that, because precedent doesn't matter a damn to them. Because we had 50 years of precedent with Roe v. Wade, and then they're like, hey, we've got a Republican majority and we're going to get rid of your rights. So I have no fucking doubt they'll try to do this with the Voting Rights Act. Because they're pieces of fucking shit. And they have no problems in taking people's rights away. Anyway, from Euronews, Russian support of the Ukraine war collapses, finds poll. In Kremlin, the Kremlin is worried about the political impact of war disaffection leading up to the 2024 presidential election, according to a U.S. think tank. Support for the Ukraine war in Russia has hit rock bottom. The independent poster Chronicle found that the number of Russians who fully support the invasion has almost halved since February 2023. The survey revealed those who favor peace far outnumber pro-war voices, with more Russians supporting the departure of the country's troops from Ukraine than not. Discussing the findings, the Institute for the Study of War said on Friday the Kremlin was likely concerned about how changing attitudes toward the war could affect the 2024 presidential election in Russia. The U.S.-based think tank claimed Vladimir Putin will center his re-election campaign on Russia's alleged domestic stability and increase criticism of the West instead of focusing on the war. Conducting polls in authoritarian states like Russia is notoriously difficult. The Kremlin has criminalized criticism of the war and spends millions on pro-war propaganda, meaning they may not reflect the realities of the situation. Chronicles, founded by Russian opposition politician Alexei Minialo, says its survey offers the accurate snapshot of public opinion, however. The Moscow-based research group asked 1,199 adults across Russia a series of questions in a phone poll between 17 and 22nd of October. It found the number of core war supporters, those who express consistent approval of the war and want the invasion to continue until it achieved its goals, fell from 22% in February of 2023 to 12% in October. The survey also revealed that 40% of Russians support the withdrawal of troops from Ukraine without war aims being achieved. So yeah. Average Russians are like, nope. 33% were against exiting Ukraine and wanted the war to continue, although this number has steadily fallen from 47% in February to 39% in July. The reason why the support for the war is falling could be that Russians are increasingly feeling the pinch and seeing a more gloomy future due to the fallout from the invasion. Polling by Chronicle echoed this, finding that 44 of the respondents have experienced a decrease in family income. Yeah, it's affecting the average Russian. So, yeah, they're wanting out. They're like, just end the war. I mean, it's pretty clear. Putin has an opponent running against him this year. And so, yeah, it's interesting to see how the election will go. Because right now, the war support is falling. Lives are being lost. They've got sanctions on the country from numerous other countries. But Putin, being a bonehead, he's like, no, we will keep going. We will keep going. This is also from the AP News. Police raid Moscow gay bars after a Supreme Court ruling labeled LGBTQ plus movement extremist. So not only have you got war fatigue, they're attacking the rights of certain groups. So yeah. Putin should have been gone long gone years ago. But he's always tweaked elections and stuff to stay in power. He was president for a while, and I remember he put one of his lackeys in as president, I think, for a term or two, and then he went back to being president, has been since. So yeah. It's more or less a dictatorship. It's not really a presidency. Miami Herald. Should Venezuela invade its oil-rich neighbor? Maduro will put it to a vote. So, let's see. This is what I want. Ad block. Pause. Thank you. Hey! Motherfucker. Don't. No. I paused. Fuck you. Fuck you. Fuck you. I ain't subscribing, damn it. No. Okay, this is pissing me the fuck off, cocksucker. You who are really fucking pissing me off. Essentially, I wanted to see who the hell Venezuela wants to invade for oil. Ha! 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 Suck a dick. Guyanese. So, Guyana. Huh. Alright. Now, let's watch some videos.
Major problem of Israel is with the young generation of the black community. Black Lives Matter starts there.
That clip was from a censored Al Jazeera documentary titled The Lobby. It looks at the Israel lobby's influence on US policy. In the expert you just saw, Israeli diplomats and lobbyists were attacking Black Lives Matter and went on to explain how they shut down a BLM fundraiser in New York and how they had co-opted leading members of the black community to stand against BLM. Israel's problem lies with BLM's support for the Palestinian cause. In 2016, BLM supported the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement and identified Israel as an apartheid state engaged in a project of genocide against Palestinians. The Israeli government was rattled and commenced its anti-BLM campaign within the US. But the civil rights movement has long shown solidarity with Palestinians. From Malcolm X and Kwame Ture's outspoken criticism of Zionism to murals of George Floyd drawn by Palestinians on Israel's apartheid wall in the occupied West Bank, the struggle for freedom has been united from the Mediterranean Sea to the Atlantic Ocean. Young black teens protesting for Palestine, unifying the struggle, and speaking out against Israel in the US represents a threat to Tel Aviv, which is wary of losing public support in the country that helps it the most. Its divide and conquer tactics are also not new. It is trying to do to the black community what it did with Palestinian resistance in the Arab world: divide its leadership and pressure it to condemn those acting against Israel. But despite its sinister tampering and the support it gets from black athletes in the NBA and other influential public figures, its efforts have failed miserably. Today, platforms for BLM activists like Shaun King and his solidarity and collaboration with people on the ground in Gaza like courageous photographer turned reporter Mu'taz Azaiza, have broken the monopoly on the narrative. Thanks for watching, guys. I would just like to take a moment to dedicate this video to my dear friend and colleague Ruqayya, who passed away a few days ago. She was a brilliant journalist, a kind and beautiful woman whose smile illuminated the world around her. She always stood for Palestine and anti-colonial struggles around the world. We will never forget you, Ruqayya. Your legacy will live on with us, and may your soul rest in peace. All our thoughts and prayers with her family and loved ones around the world.
So yeah. Honestly, it's one thing that you find in civil rights when you have the movements. Dr. King was very much someone who wanted peace in Vietnam. He's like, there is no reason we should be bombing the Vietnamese. None. So yeah, and yet we know Israel does its best to attack those who want actual, factual peace and not just kiss Israel's butt because it's the only one who will stand in the Middle East as a true democracy. Look, my heart goes out to Israel, the citizens, let's verify this, the citizens of Israel, for the terrors enacted in the Holocaust during World War II. However, my heart also goes out to the Palestinians who are unjustly being slaughtered and displaced. And yeah, there are no winners in this war. It's not even a war. It's massacre. It's genocide. In and it of itself is more or less a Holocaust. Police officer in Louisiana has been sentenced to 21 months in prison for assaulting, kicking, tasing, and pistol whipping an unarmed black man. So yeah, this is out of Louisiana. Louisiana.
Officers had detained 32-year-old Markeel Tyson when Hudson kicked him in the face. You can hear Tyson groan from the pain of being kicked. This is happening in front of the Super 8 Motel in the 4900 block of Monkhouse Drive. Not only does the video show Tyson being kicked, Hudson tasered him twice. Although you could hear Tyson say, "I'm trying to," when he commanded Hudson to lay down, when he was commanded by Hudson to lay down and put his hand behind his back.
Don't try to get up. I'm trying to put him on my back. I'm trying to, Bobo.
Hudson's been charged with malfeasance and is on paid administrative leave pending an internal investigation. The charges against Tyson for trespassing and resisting arrest have been dropped.
While holding his head on the ground and his hands on the ground, "Put your hands behind your back!" I can't. You've got them held down on the ground. Some bullshit, man. Some bullshit. And final video. BBC investigation proves child hostage Mohammed Nazal's hands were broken by Israel. Scans provided by the BBC to British doctors confirmed Nizal's hands were both broken. Yeah, this is a kid who was just released from one of the prisons in Israel during the prisoner exchange. Yeah. And essentially what happened is the Israeli guards broke his hands because they can. He looks like he's about a 11, 12-year-old kid, and he has both his hands in a cast. In casts, and they're like held to him so you can keep them stationary. Let's watch the video here.
We've come here to Kabatia village just outside Jenin. We've come to the house of Mohammed Nazal, a teenager who was released from Israeli jail this week. He says that Israeli guards beat him and injured his hands. Mohammed says both hands were fractured in the assault 8 days before his release.
Yeah, so he's just been released. He'd been in jail, in prison. It wasn't jail. And the guards essentially just beat him and beat him and beat him.
Freed from jail on Monday night, Mohammed is still imprisoned by his injuries, needing help to eat, drink and go to the bathroom, he says. First from his fellow prisoners, now from his family. The happy reunion they expected, rewritten on the faces of his relatives around the room.
They arranged us so that the elderly prisoners were put in the back and the young in the front. They took me and started beating me. I was trying to protect my head.
So yeah, I mean, we can already see how unjust the treatment is from Israeli guards because this young boy was in prison.
And they were trying to break my legs and my hands.
Israel's prison service says Mohammed was examined by a doctor before release and that his claims are false. It's published a video of him boarding a Red Cross bus on Monday night, his hands unbandaged. But meeting his family on arrival in the West Bank, both hands are wrapped in bandages. Mohammed said the first treatment he received was on that Red Cross bus. On the day he arrived back, a hospital in Ramallah confirmed that both his hands were fractured. We showed the x-rays to 2 UK doctors who confirmed the diagnosis.
Okay, so yeah, Israel trying to say his hands were never broken, but we're getting confirmations that yeah, they were.
His medical report recommends admission to hospital and possible surgery. Mohammed says abuse of Palestinian prisoners was common after the Hamas attacks last month. He showed me the bruises where he says guards used sticks, their feet and dogs to assault them.
The dog attacking me wore a muzzle with very sharp edges. His muzzle and claws left marks all over my body. Then they started beating us. They took our mattress, our clothes, our pillows, and they threw our food on the floor. People were terrified.
Yeah. I mean, this is just cruelty of the highest degree. And you have trouble understanding why they would join a group like Hamas, even though they hadn't been able to vote for them since 2006. All you're doing is making people more extremist by beating the crap out of those who are just trying to live their life.
Other prisoners have confirmed that guards' behaviour changed after the Hamas attacks. The BBC has spoken to 6 prisoners who said they were beaten before their release. The Palestinian Prisoners Society says it's heard testimony of guards urinating on handcuffed inmates. Israel says it's not aware of these claims and that all prisoners are legally detained. Mohammed's brother says something in him has broken.
This is not the Muhammad we know. He was much stronger back then. It's as if his heart is filled with terror.
Mohammed's freedom was bought by Hamas with Israeli hostages. The impact of the Hamas attacks keenly felt, he says, in the chance of release and in Israeli jails.
That is just... You know, these things should not happen, but it's like, hey, we're Israel and we're just defending ourselves. I've made this point before. It's like the country of Israel got gently shoved. It turns around, grabs them by the neck, and it says, "Why are you making me defend myself? Why are you making me defend myself?" That's how it feels. But honestly, yeah, there is no winners in this conflict. Anyway, we'll go ahead and end the video there. As always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. Someone tells you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. I'll be putting links in the description box below the video. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all in the next one. Until then, later.